there is emerging evidence that AI is replacing a lot of entry level positions for youth. And so, if you have the choice between bringing on additional entry level workers with a sociology degree and no defined skills, or replacing some of those tasks they might ordinarily do with technology that doesn't need any mental health time, doesn't want Christmas off, and is willing to work on a regular basis. I mean, that's been sort of the underlying pattern of technology substitution, whether it's robotics in a factory, and now with AI creeping into the white collar workforce, you're seeing the exact same phenomenon.
Good morning, HR. I'm Mike Coffey, president of Imperative, bulletproof background checks with fast and friendly service. And this is the podcast where I talk to business leaders about bringing people together to create value for all stakeholders. Rich Froeschle returns to the podcast today to discuss the economic and demographic trends affecting the workforce. Rich is a labor market economist and a popular speaker on a wide array of topics relating to the economy, labor markets, and workforce and education programs. He is the Senior Labor Market Economist for Texas State Technical College and the former director of the Labor Market and Career Information Department at the Texas Workforce Commission. Welcome back to Good Morning HR, Rich.
Well, it was a thrill to be with you the first time, Mike, and I'm doubly thrilled now, having had the first experience, to be back with you again today.
That was about 150 episodes, so about 3 years ago.
That's amazing. Again, congratulations to you on your success.
Oh, thanks. It's been fun. It's if I could figure out how to monetize it, my wife would be happy, but I'm just, it's good for giggles. So I want to talk about generational demographics today and see what the data tells us. But, you're an economist and we're in the third quarter of the year, 6 months into President Trump's term, on again, off again tariffs. So we're today is July 18th. This is going to be released next week. Where is the economy at today? And what's the message for employers where we are right now?
So just like you, if I had the answer to that and I could monetize it, I'd be in a much bigger house driving a much nicer car.
Yeah.
So the answer is kind of interesting because the imposition of tariffs on a global scale, like the Trump administration is doing, has never really been done before. So you've got a lot of people that are thinking about the imposition of tariffs from a political lens and through a theoretical lens, but we don't really have a lot of experience in actually pulling it off and seeing how all of the actors, the millions of independent actors, all functioning in this economy, are going to respond to what is a very shifting a viewpoint on tariffs. I mean, tariffs are coming, they're happening, they're kicking in sort of in a stair-step fashion. Sometimes revisiting some of these agreements. So if there's anything, and I don't think I'm telling stories for any employer, is it's the uncertainty that we're seeing right now with the tariffs that's sort of putting a pause on business investment. People there's a wait and see on it. Remarkably, the consumer continues to spend money. Don't seem overly plussed about that. We've had some level of layoffs, but not significant. But trying to get a new job, if you're not already in the labor market, is increasingly challenged. And that's especially true for younger people. So when we start talking about generational issues related to youth, are they having a harder time breaking the labor market? And the answer is yes, they absolutely are.
Yeah, last time I looked at it, the quit rate was going down. And certainly when I'm talking to our clients on the background check side, it's been a weird year. We'll dry up. There's just nobody seems to be, none of our clients seem to be really hiring at their normal rate.
Yeah.
And you talk to them and they're like, yeah, we need to hire. The hiring managers are begging to hire, but executive leadership keeps saying, tap the brakes. Let's see what happened. And then the pressure builds up and they release it all at once and hire a bunch of people. And then leadership gets nervous again and says, tap the brakes. But a lot of the churn in the employment market is because of quits. And it seems like people are really holding on to their jobs. Is there data to really support that besides just what I see in I think it's the Bureau of Labor Statistics?
Yeah, the Bureau of Labor Statistics JOLTS data series gives us a monthly peek at that. And the Federal Reserve pays a lot of attention, especially to the quits rate. And I'm looking at it here now. It has been declining over time. It's actually leveled off over the last 4 or 5 months. the number of job postings continues to float down, although it's leveled off a little bit. What really hasn't sort of recovered, if you will, is the hiring rate. So there's still postings out there, but there's a lot more resume phishing and other things
Mm-hmm.
going on than there is actual hiring. I think if you talk to a lot of job candidates, they're going through a process of 5, 6, 7 interviews to make sure they're the perfect hire, because we're just not hiring a lot of additional people that aren't designed to fit a niche need or an important critical need at a business.
And unemployment's like we're at full employment pretty much. I mean, it's
Yeah.
4.1% for 2 months in a row on a national basis. I think here in Texas, where you and I are located, it's down about, a tenth of a point from that. I mean, so we're doing okay, but I keep hearing how hard it is to find a job.
Right.
And I spend way too much time on Reddit and some of the social media sites related to HR. And I'm hearing it from, even people who used to never have a problem getting a job, tech workers, coders, things like that. So how reliable do you think the unemployment number is? Have we just had a lot of people drop out of the market, or they're not eligible for unemployment, and so that maybe they're not getting counted the same?
Wow, there's about 27 questions all
Yeah.
in there. A lot of them are really nerdy, but there are a couple of things that are true, and I think actually Chair Powell pointed this out the other day. Is that response rate from a lot of the employer surveys, whether they're coming from the Bureau of Labor Statistics or the Census Bureau, response rates are coming down fairly significantly, which means those statistical agencies are having to impute a lot more data,
Mm.
which is only going to inject more volatility in the data. And then when revision time comes, benchmarking time comes, usually once a year, we see much wider variations, much wider adjustments that have to be made. So yeah, the statistical system is letting us down a little bit in that process, but the uptake rate really is slower. In my particular view, I think a lot of that has to do with the uncertainty of the way we started this conversation with the global economy, with trade and traffic flows, with cost structures that may be influenced by tariffs, and so there's still a little wait and see process. But as you well know, employers work very hard to get the workforce that they have now in that, as you say, full employment environment. So, so what we're seeing is that employers are pretty reticent to get rid of workers that they work very hard to put in place until they absolutely have to. And there was a time back in 22, 23 where job switchers were making 7-8% wage gains over time, and job stayers were at the 4 and 5%. So it really paid to switch jobs to make money. That gap is now almost completely eliminated. So job stayers and job switchers are making about the same wage gains over
Mm.
time. So there's less of an economic incentive for workers to leave their job. There's fewer hiring. So again, it's not like you can quit this job and just go find another job readily. And so you've seen a lot more workers sort of stay in place. That doesn't mean they're any happier or more productive, but they're not leaving their jobs.
We've got an HR audience largely here. And so you mentioned Fed Chair Jerome Powell saying that people aren't responding to those surveys, employers aren't responding. Did he have an idea as to why, or do you have an idea as to why why that response rate's going down? Because we'd all like good data, right?
Um, I've been involved in the BLS programs back when I was the labor market information director for many, many years, and the response rates. We work very hard with more and more money to go out and do second waves and third waves of follow up to collect additional data.
Right.
That funding is just not there. I mean,
Mm.
in many ways, and I hope this is just not an inspired economist, complaining about his own field, but the federal government and state governments spend billions and billions of dollars that they think are or that they want to be data informed or data driven decisions, and yet we've made almost no investment in the federal statistical system, and in fact, in real terms, we've had declines, and so you don't, instead of having 5 waves of follow up to collect a piece of information, now you get 2.
Mm.
Instead of having um, having detailed surveys and enumerators that go out. We make phone calls or we accept mails or emails, and business has more important things to do. So I think a lot of it does go back to funding. I always hate people talk about funding, but in this case, the federal statistical system has had no concomitant increase in their funding to overcome some of the challenges that we've seen. On the flip side, federal statistical system hasn't really done a lot to update their methodologies to accommodate some of the new technologies. But in some ways, um, there's a reason for that because a lot of people have counted on very consistent data collections and methodologies and uniformity of approach that nobody sort of wants to uproot right now. So from a data standpoint, it's kind of an iffy period.
Yeah, well, and data collection. I mean, any HR person listening who's ever tried to do an employee satisfaction survey or a 360 feedback program and get the responses you need, you know how hard that can be. And so if we're cutting down the number of follow-ups, that's just going to result in that number. So, and you know, let's be honest, right now, the general zeitgeist is anti-government too. So there's probably some hesitancy to tell the government anything. That's that general idea that we're just not going to do that. We'll figure it out ourselves. But
Yeah,
let's talk.
I haven't seen that. I haven't seen that political bias in the data collection process. But ignoring the government, period, but
Mhm,
regardless of what side of the aisle is on, I think is in vogue and
mhm.
has been influencing a lot of the data
Yeah.
collection.
So let's talk about generations then. So we've got everybody from Gen Z to boomers still working. So, my parents' generation, I'm Gen X, all the way to my youngest kids are, in the labor force now. So, what do you think the biggest trend affecting employers and generational issues is right now?
I think there are a couple of issues that are going on, like in terms of youth uptake and the
Hmm.
process that youth is having. One, they're suffering just like everybody else in terms of slow uptake and hiring. So we tend to say, oh, they're just different. They have different problems, and they do. They have some unique problems, but they're also suffering from the fact that employers aren't hiring in general, are being very cautious before hiring, and they're hiring for people that have specific skills and experiences, right? It was talking about a new skills-based hiring environment, and young people, almost by definition, don't have those experiences, so they don't rise to the top of that list. There is emerging evidence that AI is replacing a lot of entry-level positions for youth, and so if you have the choice between bringing on additional entry-level workers with a sociology degree and no defined skills, or replacing some of those tasks they might ordinarily do with technology that doesn't need any mental health time, doesn't want Christmas off, and is willing to work on a regular basis. I mean, that's been sort of the underlying pattern of technology substitution, whether it's robotics in a factory, and now with AI creeping into the white collar workforce, you're seeing the exact same phenomena. What's really interesting is that employers have had to deal with this changing attitude that you mentioned that
Hmm.
Gen Z is bringing into the workplace, and it's a different attitude. There's a different view towards work-life balance, what their role in work is, what they value, mental health, the corporate culture, um, corporate citizenship of the company that they work for, all of these kinds of things, work from home policies, and and if you take the average baby boomer hiring authority, right, and you say, this is what, in order to hire me, this is what I want you to put up with, even if they're right, even if we do all need more work-life balance, it almost doesn't matter. That boomer saying, I got a job to do. You're a piece of talent that I'm bringing to apply to the job. I hope that you will come and I hope you'll apply your skills here. But if not, now that I've got AI around the corner, a lot of the things that I might have ordinarily asked you to do, maybe I'll at least think about substituting AI.
I think a lot of that is because I'm seeing it too as I talk to especially small to medium sized employers, my friends who are entrepreneurs here in Texas and around the country. They've got their mid level professionals or even their higher level professionals more experienced, and they would used to backstop them with interns or
Right.
with entry level people who could do the grunt work basically,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe build the PowerPoints or do those things. But now you've got AI to do those, and so with a little training, we can train those professionals to be a lot more efficient in how they get work done
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
without new labor. And the real question is, what are we going to do in 10 years when this emerging generation right now doesn't have that competencies, and we get to the point where the boomers and even finally retire, and people like me, Gen X, start saying, yeah, we've done our thing, we're ready to move on.
As an economist, I've never had so much fun because AI is like having my own research assistant, right?
Right.
With the caveat, and this is super important, and I know your audience appreciates this, is you cannot take the human out of the loop with AI because AI does hallucinate. I mean,
Yeah, pardon the French, but it makes shit up sometimes. And
it,
so,
it
it's
does.
just,
But you
yeah,
know what? For me to go out and say, I want you to do do a scan on this particular topic, look for these particular things, provide the citation so that I can
hmm
follow up on your
there you
work
go.
later on, and that's all part of appropriate prompt engineering. When
Right.
you write it that way and you put it in, you get stuff that would have taken you days to do. That now someone like myself who has experience in being able to tell a story with data, I have this research assistant sitting over here in my pocket that's available 24 hours a day to answer these kind of questions. Well, you got to believe that that's an awfully powerful incentive to be able to say entry level worker, no experience,
hmm
some random college degree, or AI technology that
Right.
I have to make sure there's a human in the loop in the process for quality control.
Right.
But still, what can it do? Oh, it's not as hard a choice as it seems. And here's the other part, at least in my view, is that, and I think you've seen a lot of this, where we are using AI now just to substitute for things in ways that we've always done. We call it paving the cow path, right? Is you're using technology, using AI
hmm
technology in this case, just to do things in the exact same way. We're just now automating it in ways. What happens when those systems grow up and we're no longer following the cow path? Is that systems are written around processes that you could only have done with the
Yeah.
invent or the advent of AI. Now you've got some real disruption in the labor market.
Yeah, when we can tell it, we're at point A here, we want to get to point Z,
Yeah.
you figure it out, and there's maybe a human or two with with a light touch on it to make sure it steers in the right direction. That's going to have a big impact on how work gets done. I'm a big believer in technology though. So, and I think when you look historically, there's always disruption, new technology, replaces some jobs, makes them irrelevant, or rolls them into one job. But then innovation, when the new technology comes out,
Mhm.
there's things that we never imagined
Mhm.
that happen, and new kinds of companies, new kinds of innovation happen. And if you're willing to continue to learn, you'll find that role. But the people who can't or won't adopt the technology, I think those are the folks who are going to have the biggest challenge.
Yeah, Scott Galloway has a great quote, and I use it all the time. That says, AI won't take your job, but somebody that knows AI will. I think there's something else to remember here, and that is that all these great shifts, the Industrial Revolution, and all these, they happened. They were very disruptive, and we need to talk about the time lag. Is that there's an immediate disruption where we lost jobs, and we were in a negative, job loss situation for a while until the new jobs were created. Until we figured out what the technology could do and started building job tasks, roles, business processes around them. And I don't see any reason why this won't be the exact same way. It's that there will be some short term pain as disruption happens. There will be new job creation under new job titles doing new things. HR people get ready for new classification systems and,
Right.
and job title rewrites, right? But there's going to be a lag question. And so part of the question is right now it's going to be temporary. It's easing into being painful. It may be there for a while. The new jobs will be created. We'll start retraining around those, whether it's upskilling or whether it's new graduates. And I think there will be a countervailing force, but there will be a disruptive period that I think we're starting to enter.
I think the good news is with industrialization, that lag meant we were waiting on factories to be built and all the infrastructure.
Yes, right.
If we're in a knowledge economy, we can scale that a lot faster. And as soon as the technology is available, people will start, building companies overnight, decentralized companies, remote employees all over the place. But that's the other market, right? What do you, is there any good data as to what offshore full-time employees, not just contractors, but actually, offshoring work through, to PEOs or other labor agencies in other countries. Is there any data out there as to how widespread that is and what the impact has been so far on the American employment situation?
There's data in terms of like foreign direct investment it's dollar denominated, but not
Mhm.
necessarily denominated in terms of jobs.
Yeah.
So
I think that's a trend that we may not be paying enough attention to.
Well,
I mean,
here's an interesting trend, surprised the
yeah.
heck out of me during COVID. And that was the number of new business formations, applications for new businesses. During COVID, it just went absolutely through the roof.
Right.
But when we look a little deeper to that, what we found is that those permits that were being requested, those applications we were putting in, were for essentially one-person firms, right?
Mhm.
They're more like consulting LLCs than anything else, without any intent to build a business, meaning to employ additional workers. And so that rate, that's really what's driving that new business formation rate. But the new business formation, it's kind of like Gen Z. I think I saw a survey the other day, don't know how reliable it was, that said almost a third of all Gen Zers have some kind of side hustle, some kind of side
Mhm.
gig going on, right? Whatever it happened to be. Well, that's a lot, and it went down by generation. So by the time it got to my generation, that number was like 10% or something like that.
Mhm.
But that's going on. There's a lot of entrepreneurship. There's a lot of innovation going on around technology, but it's not necessarily job denominated. We're not necessarily adding a lot of jobs. We're adding value to the economy. We're adding dollars. We're adding tax revenues, but not necessarily new employment.
And I'd be remiss. We talk about AI a lot here, and you mentioned you've got favorite tool. What's your favorite tool right now for doing analysis and research? What are you using most?
I have the paid subscription to chat
Yeah,
for.
yeah.
I dabble with Copilot because I'm dabbling in the Windows environment, so I look at that. It's okay. I don't have a lot of experience. I've dabbled with Grok.
Hmm.
I like Grok a lot as well.
Grok and ChatGPT 4.5's their test, their beta, whatever they're calling it, for their deep research. It's amazing, yeah. And that's those are the two that I find right now. Although if I need something well written, I go to Claude, Anthropic's Claude.ai, because it's the best of them as far as I can tell. That as far as just writing something that sounds human and
Hmm.
isn't patronizing. So
That's never been one of my issues because writing is something I enjoy doing. Usually I'm a fairly decent writer from scratch. I don't really like to let the software write for me. I don't mind it
it
making
gives me a
suggestions.
good third draft at least,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that's what I'm really looking for. And then I spin it to my stuff. But
Here's
you,
the other part.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was just going to add. Here's the other part: is that I'm still not sure that as we begin to rely on these various AI tools, um, that we don't get dumber. All right, is that we don't lose critical thinking skills. We lose writing skills. That we just become so reliant on the software to do some of these things that our skills atrophy. So although we may actually be increasing productivity on the business side, is it really making our workers as individuals, not as part of the cog in an organization, but as individuals? Is it making them smarter and better? And I think the jury's going to be still out on that one.
And let's take a quick break. Good Morning HR is brought to you by Imperative, bulletproof background checks with fast and friendly service. It's no secret, identity fraud in employment is on the rise. Dishonest job seekers are using fake or stolen identity information to apply for and often actually obtain employment. In fact, if you've been paying attention or you've watched my webinar on preventing remote worker fraud, you know that the North Korean government has for the last decade been stealing U.S. tech workers' identities and then using that information to get real remote work jobs with U.S. companies, violating U.S. sanctions and perpetrating frauds against those employers. In order to better protect our clients, Imperative is introducing new tools to prevent identity fraud. With our new biometric identity verification process, we validate the identity documents candidates present and then use AI to capture a video selfie of the individual and verify that it matches the photo on their ID. And the whole process takes less than 5 minutes. For more information on this cutting-edge service, reach out to me or visit our website at imperativeinfo.com. If you're an HRCI or SHRM certified professional, this episode of Good Morning HR has been pre-approved for 3/4 of a recertification credit. If you're HRCI certified, it's business credit. To obtain the recertification information, visit goodmorninghr.com and click on Recert Credits. Then select episode 210 and enter the keyword Gen Z. That's all one word, GENZ. And if you're looking for more recertification credit, check out the webinars page at imperativeinfo.com. And now back to my conversation with Rich Froeschle. Yeah, there was an article late June, I think, to that effect, kind of a quasi Wall Street Journal or somebody article saying that, this is going to make us dumber, and then everybody jumped on that bandwagon. But then I started seeing the pushback on that, saying it's going to make some of you dumber because you're already dumb, but the people who can edit the data and edit the text or whatever it is, refine information and just let it do that gathering for them, are going to be fine. And the students, and teachers are going to have to find new ways. I mean, we're going to go back to Socratic method or something where you have to defend ideas, because, and that's fine. Do I need to know everything in Encyclopedia Britannica or having it at my fingertips where it's spit out, as long as I can synthesize it and use it in a way? So that's going to be a skill set, I think, that people don't necessarily have right now. And a lot of times are really good at using data to solve problems. I've got an engineer son who thrives at it, and I've got a ballet son, professional ballet dancer son, who I'm not sure I would even want him to make a doctor's appointment for me. So I guess it all, But you mentioned the boomers earlier. When are they going to retire? I mean, I keep seeing these pushes to say, these people need to get out so Gen Z can, begin to move up. Is there any indication as to if how much longer are the boomers going to hang out? Because I'm early Gen X from the late 60s, so and I'm seeing a lot of my friends who are much older than me still in the workforce and enjoying it, really. I mean, not necessarily out of necessity, maybe.
That's not a personal affront, is it, Mike?
No. I think you and I are about the same age.
No, I'm actually I'm a mid boomer myself, and I love what I do, and I've always been enthusiastic as long as I have good health and the ability to do some of this. It's my passion and my fun, and I enjoy it. And there are others like me, but the labor force participation rates for your boomers are down to, let's see, I think I had the number here someplace. It was around 14% of the labor force now in Texas is either boomer or older. And the older is like maybe 1/10 or 0.2%. So only 14% of the labor force, and 53% of the Texas workforce is either millennial or Gen Z, right? So I mean, they're
definitely the majority.
The shift has happened, right? You Gen Xers are kind of just the stable generation. You weren't, you didn't really, there was no echo to you, and there was no peak to you. But you're the stable part of the market. The few boomers that are still here that are floating around are either here for financial reasons because they didn't plan, and they can't stop working, or they're in my camp where they really love working and enjoy what they're doing, so they're sticking around. But slowly but surely they are aging out. Like I said, less than 14% of the Texas workforce is a boomer or older. So.
And what about the labor participation rate on millennials and Gen Z? We keep hearing things that they're dropping out, they're not participating, and it's so much of it's anecdotal. What does it really look like? How many, are they really living in their parents' basement and playing, video games or doing whatever they do all day, or are we really seeing that they're working about the same level as other generations did at their age?
If there was something meaningful in the data, I would say that it's more about your levels of education, because your labor force participation rate rises the more education that you have. So our college educated workers are coming in at around 92%. So if you can get a college degree, even if you're not working at a college level job, meaning you're underemployed, you're still probably working. But when you get to high school only or below high school, your labor force participation rates drop into the high 60s. And so most of the surveys that I have seen, when they're asked why aren't you doing anything? Why aren't you in the workforce? Why aren't you in education and training? Their primary answer is I either have health problems, and Lord knows what that actually means,
Right.
or they don't feel that they have the skills that will get them the job to get them the earnings that they feel is worth the effort, right? And so that's kind of, there's a very interesting phenomena going on. It's called the reservation wage. The New York Federal Reserve has been capturing their consumer sentiment for years and years and years, which is at what wage would you be willing to get off the couch and go to work? And the numbers are the figures are astronomical about the value. We talk about the entitled generation, like Gen Z feeling so entitled, whatever it is, or they have a college degree, ergo they feel they're entitled to it, not only a job but a high paying job, and are having this rude awakening when they hit the labor market. That's the data bear that out. The reservation wage for college graduates is up in the mid 90s.
For
And
recent graduates.
Yeah, for recent graduates.
Okay.
We're not talking about for everybody, for recent graduates. Mm-hmm. And we still have, like I said, I've been at this one for a very long time too. We still have a very significant structural mismatch between what people are studying and the programs that have the highest wages and the greatest demand.
Okay. That makes sense, right?
And especially, Gen Z is getting maybe a little better. Maybe it's turning around a little bit. It's hard to tell. Some of the construction fields have come in, construction technology, a few things started to creep up. But they're still studying things that are of interest to them and feel like they'll just handle the labor market when they complete the degree because, by God, I have the degree and, I must be worth X number of dollars. And when they see that the labor market doesn't value their credential as a generic credential, but rather their major, their field of study, or more importantly, the skill sets that they acquired, it's kind of a rude awakening. And I still don't think we do a particularly good job informing young people about the importance of informed education and career choices. I mean, I don't care if you want to study underwater basket weaving, that's up to you. But just know that most of them don't work in a career-related field, right? And if you don't work in a career-related field, the odds are that your earnings are going to be relatively low. Know that, still make the decision, it's up to you. But they should at least be able to know that. I think we need to do a better job as a whole communicating that.
Well, and I've always wondered, I mean, there are, like I live right across the street from Texas Christian University, go Frogs, but you can spend, $70,000 a year on education for 4 years at a lot of private schools and get a degree in humanities or social work or something like that, where there's maybe not a big demand for that specific whatever skill set you might have learned or the competencies you developed in those 4 years. And I wonder, we've been telling these kids, you've got to go to school, you got to go to school, you got to get a college degree, but the opportunity cost of the amount of money they're paying plus interest probably on student loans over some period of time, and the time they're not getting practical, in those 4 years that they're in school, they're not getting practical real world experience and actual income. I wonder what the sliding scale is with that opportunity cost running out to actually make that degree worthwhile for those students in higher earnings at some point in the future.
Well, I think as we both know that those students are mostly reacting to labor market myths, and their parents say it was certainly at TCU, being a high dollar private university. We went to college. You're going to go to college. Whether you're college material or not, and they might say, "Mom, I want to be a line worker," and they go, "Oh no, you're not getting on a pole. You're going to college. You're going to get a degree, come hell or high water." We still have some of that kind of guidance going on. We have that kind of guidance going on even in the secondary.
We measure the school success, right?
Exactly right.
And fortunately, like I'm seeing a lot of school districts in my workforce development volunteering, focusing more on either college readiness and going to college or some sort of competencies or certifications that suggest that person, that individual, that student, emerging new worker is able to get a job, is workforce ready in a specific skill. And the trades are just, we've told, we need to tell kids clearly, get into the trades. I mean, there's kids who are really well suited for that kind of work, and who could learn those things and have jobs. I mean, we're always going to need somebody to work on air conditioning and plumbing and pipe fitters and welders and all of that. And those are high tech, and those aren't the dirty jobs they used to be. Those aren't the micro dirty jobs anymore. A lot of employers are having a hard time finding those jobs.
Can I make a quick pitch for Texas State Technical College?
Yes.
There is no
Yeah,
junior labor market
y'all's
economist.
model is really good. Yeah.
There is no junior labor market economist, so I'm it. But we have this thing called our value funding model, where most colleges are funded based on headcount. So their marketing is getting students in and making sure that when headcount census time comes around, they got a lot of bodies in the seats. We think about the world in a very different way, and that is that we get our state money based on the 5-year rolling labor market outcomes achieved by our students. So what that means for us is we can't have them come in, just sit around, get a worthless degree or a degree with lack of marketability. I don't think there's anything as a worthless degree, lack of market relevance, and then go out in the world. We want to make sure that when you come to TSTC, that we have already looked at programs that are going to be in demand. There are jobs related to it. There's and not just any job. The higher paying job that you can get, the better our value funding model works for us. And we add into that a lot of workplace behavior. So like when you come to some of our programs, if you're absent 3 times, we throw you out. Why? Because we're in the business world. They're going to throw you out when you're absent. So we don't, we market, but we want people to come because they know that what they're getting is market relevant skills. We spend a lot of time, energy, and money on our curriculum, making sure our curriculum and our competencies are market relevant. And so when you come here, when you come to TSTC, that's what you have, that assurance, because we have put skin in the game as opposed to so many of these colleges that are based on headcount.
We're running up on time, but I definitely, are we seeing trends post COVID, post shutdown and all of that about what remote work is doing to the labor force and to the economy?
Yeah,
What's the data around that?
it's spoiling us like nobody's business. And I'm a bad person to talk about because I work at home and have
here we are. Yeah.
Right. So so I'm thinking, oh, this is great. But I feel very on occasions, I feel very disconnected from my team and the information sharing associated with that. And there was a necessity. There was a medical necessity. You can argue the timing of it all day long, but to do remote work. But I think business is decided that the synergies that they get from having people in the office, at least on a core number of days, is very important to their productivity, and they're bringing them back into the office. It is interesting. BLS now has a survey on a work from home survey. They started in 23. They've got 24 data now, and they're looking at various age, race, sex, education categories and their work from home activity. And if you are a college educated female with 10 or more years of experience in the workforce, the odds that you are doing at home work are much higher than if you're a 20-year-old that doesn't have a college degree. It does break down by Anglo and people of color as well. And so there are some very different patterns about who's actually getting to work at home. But I don't think the jury is out anymore that the productivity gains for having workers in the workforce, businesses decided they need that, at least for the a core number of days during the week.
So, and my concern has been for younger employees, these emerging, new grads or emerging employees early in their careers, not having the mentorship.
Yeah.
And maybe they're going in the office, but if those leaders and those managers are working remote and they're not getting that direct hands-on, I mean, the things I learned most over my career weren't things I learned in a classroom or through self-study. It was me screwing up and having a boss pull me aside and say, "Hey, don't be a knucklehead. Here's how you fix this, or here's how you treat people, or whatever it is." And without that mentorship, I think a lot of young people are going to have real real challenges in their career over the next 10, 20, 30 years.
I not only agree 100%, but there is some survey work that says that Gen Z does want mentors. They do want to learn. They just don't want to have to go in the office to have to do it, right? And so they don't have to put up with that part of it. So it's kind of like you have to pick your poison one way or the other. Um, uh, we are seeing again complaints that young workers are not accustomed to receiving feedback and don't receive negative feedback well. And you and I both know, because we've been talking about this forever, is that generational knowledge transfer across generations has been a big deal, right, in the HR space for a long time. Now, what do we say? 5 generations, really technically 4, in the workplace, and that knowledge transfer is super important. And how is that knowledge transfer happening? Well, if you're trying to mentor a Gen Z and they don't want to talk on the phone and they don't want to come in the office, and you can't break down everything into a text or put it on Instagram, you've got some communication challenges. And it wouldn't surprise me that the entire HR field is having that particular challenge, and having that challenge with Gen Z about how they learn, their willingness to learn, and their willingness to accept negative feedback. And the sort of the buzz on the street is most employers, and especially those that are still headed by baby boomer hiring authorities and managers, don't feel like Gen Z is doing a good job of receiving feedback.
Well, and that kind of ties back to that idea of what we've traditionally called soft skills, but they're really the hard skills. The people skills, being able to accept feedback, being able to give feedback, resilience, things like that, communication across generations. I'm hearing employers tell us that that's a challenge in their current workforce and in the greater labor market, finding people with those skills. And they're saying those are more important than the actual competencies to do the job. Is there data out there supporting that, or is it just anecdotal on my part?
I haven't seen that, but it doesn't surprise me. And again, I think that's very consistent with what we've seen in some of the other indicators. If we really wanted to talk labor force related stuff, our biggest challenge is where are we going to get the labor supply? I think you actually intimated about Mike Rowe and his will gap and some of these things. Where are we going to get the labor supply for some of those, electricians and plumbers and the like? But also in leisure and hospitality and hotel management, some of these, where are we going to get some of these workers when the demand for those skills largely cannot be taken over by AI, and yet that labor force is shrinking. And if you've got 55 or 60% of your new labor force entrants are coming with college degrees, most of them didn't get that college degree to think they needed to
wait tables, fold towels,
or get their hands dirty in any way, shape or form, right? So we do have some pretty interesting structural mismatches that align with those cultural mismatches.
And so let's close it then with that labor shortage and talk about immigration. How important is even undocumented immigration? And employers hiring people who aren't documented to work in the U.S. How important is that? Is there data to suggest really how important that is to the labor market?
Well, that's I'm not going to punt on this one, but it's a very politically charged, depending on what side of the aisle you sort of sit on. I can tell you a couple of things that I think are definitive. One, our labor force is not growing through natural birth and death. We're not making any headway. So if we're not immigrating labor force, no matter how many jobs we create and how much economic activity and generate, if the labor force is not growing through immigration, we're going to have that's a serious cap on our productivity and our economy as a whole. So it has to come from someplace. And so I don't think there's any doubt about that. Now, what that immigration system looks like is another story. Currently, with so many illegal immigrants coming across, they're operating in fields where some of it off the books. I was surprised about how many were actually able to get green cards and work. That was a big surprise to me when I started looking at the data. But they are depressing wages. They have depressed wages. You can't throw a bunch of supply in there and expect to see wage increases. So there has been a dampening effect on those particular areas with immigration. When you take a large number of those people out, either physically or you put them in the shadows, which is the worst thing that we can do, in my opinion, will it cause wage raise to normalize and to rise? the theory says yes. The theory said that wages should start going back up for those people that take those jobs.
But that also leads to inflation too, though, right? When wages start to
Yeah,
go up, doesn't that
you
drive
will.
cost?
You will get a little inflation. I think politically, you'd hope that you're doing other things to offset through enhanced productivity to offset that little bit of wage inflation that you're liable to run into. Uh, but I don't think there's any doubt that we need to find some way to harness immigration in a meaningful way so that we can take advantage of people that do want to be here and work within our boundaries and work within our systems lawfully and legally.
Yeah,
And
to the
Congress
extent that we have work for them to do. Yeah.
Congress has just done a very poor job of giving us mechanisms to be able to do that. And I'm surprised the business community hasn't revolted yet about not having appropriate avenues to be able to access skilled labor.
Yeah, for 3 decades, it's been punted, and I think both parties are served in with different constituencies by letting the current system stay in place. So,
yeah.
Well,
I think I'd have to put a little brandy in my good morning coffee before we have any more conversations on that one.
Okay, well, that's all the time we have, so I'll spare you any more. But thanks for joining me again, Rich. I really appreciate it.
Always my pleasure, Mike. Thanks. Good to talk to you.
And thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please write us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. And then share this episode on your favorite social media platform. It helps us reach more listeners. And we'd love to hear what you have to say at goodmorninghr.com. Good Morning HR is produced by Marianne Hernandez and Paco Corral on Imperative's marketing team. The Good Morning HR theme music was created by Steve Pegler at HR Strategies of Texas. And I'm Mike Coffey. As always, don't hesitate to reach out if I can be of service to you personally or professionally. I'll see you next week, and until then, be well, do good, and keep your chin up.